Honourable Deputy Leader, you reserve the right to speak. Right. The Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, I move that all words after that be omitted and the following be substituted.
Order.
That the Leader of the Opposition owes this House and the public an explanation for his determination to impose employment-destroying policies such as the GST, the cuts in labour market programs and zero tariffs. The House is further of the opinion that the Leader of the Opposition owes the public an explanation for his contempt and intimidation of various groups in Australia who question or oppose his policies, and his negative comments about Australia, such as his statement yesterday that Australia is on the slippery slope to nowhere. Now, Mr Speaker,
point of order, Leader of the National Party.
Speaker, I invite your consideration of the wording of that amendment. It is in many forms.
Order. The member for Forest is out of order. The member for Bendigo, the member for Ballarat. I warn the member for Ballarat. The Leader of the National Party has the call.
Mr Deputy Speaker, I draw your attention to the wording of that amendment moved by the Prime Minister. I point out that there are quite specific rulings on the construction of amendments to those motions, and I ask that you rule that that amendment, as worded, is out of order.
The important test is whether or not an amendment addresses the substantive matter dealt with in the original motion. And in this case, the amendment does, so the motion is in order. The Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition got up to move this motion. He's hardly asked a question all week. He's hardly participated in the debate. Yesterday there was not, I think, one question, maybe none.
Order.
Mr Speaker, he was stung by the clarity of the government's attack upon his spitefulness. He said in a very weak introduction to his remarks, he said the Prime Minister has mounted a case for the exclusion of food. I made no such case whatsoever. Read back through. Well, I invite any interested observer to read over the Hansard extract. In fact, what I responded to was simply the question was this: can the Prime Minister say whether the government accepts the right of community organisation to express such views and indicate whether the government intends to continue to consult the community about major policy issues? That was the issue I directed myself to. I directed myself to the savage remarks in Senator Alston's letters to the Catholic Church and its groups,
the member
for Pearce and its groups, while at the same time having addressed those savage remarks, you've actually then invoke the words of their spiritual leader, the Pope, to support your grubby political case. That's what I attacked, Mr Speaker. And I attacked, Mr Speaker, the fact that it was good enough for this government to sit the whole of Australia's interest groups there in 1983 for the Economic Summit, as it was good for the tax debate to sit them in the chamber of the House of Representatives for the 1985 Tax Summit and listen and take like a man their criticism without spiteful rebuttals or abuse, and then to sit down, as I did in consultation over the One Nation package right around the country this year with my colleagues at the recently concluded Youth Summit, where we again heard views and criticisms of government policy without spiteful rebukes or attacks. That's the issue here. Not about trying to manufacture a case that I was actually arguing for the exclusion of food. That is another matter. That's another matter. What I was arguing about was your viciousness, your vicious behaviour. The fact is, you've now attacked just about every group in the country, and one has to wonder what sort of a government would it be. I don't think any the Australian community have ever seen any government, that is Conservative or Labor, led by a person and a group who has developed such characteristics as to be so scornful and spiteful about virtually the whole of the interests of this country, whether it's the Treasury or the ABC or the Deputy Reserve Bank Governor or the RBA Board or its Governor or the financial markets or the environment groups or Philip Tyne or the Press Gallery or the or Mr Groom or the business community or the public service or ACOS or the Australian Catholic Welfare Commission or Jack Nasser and John Prescott, or the ethnic leaders, or all the Australians who are told that they are rationalists, losers, bludgers, that they won't work, These are all of the groups you attack, and now, of course, the Catholic Welfare Commission having the temerity to say it's argued that taxing people for their consumption of food undermines the essential human dignity of every Australian. Further, a regressive system of taxation, one which places a tax burden on the less well-off, contravenes the Catholic social principles of the common good, human solidarity, human dignity, preference for the poor and the common use of goods. It's a view, a very respectable view. Why should it be met? Why should it be met with words like mealy-mouthed assertions? Why should it be met with words like that they're untrained in economics, a crass attempt at moral intimidation? I mean, is this the Liberal Party of Malcolm Fraser or Bob Menzies or John Gorton? Of course it's not. It's the Liberal Party of spiteful small people, who can't accept criticism from anybody. And this notion of a creature of the 80s boom driving around in Ferraris telling me about people and their jumpers, about the poor who this government have provided for with a massive increase in unemployment benefits, someone who wants to tip off unemployment benefits after 9 months, or the leader of the National Party yesterday invoking the valour of a Vietnam veteran to make a lousy point about unemployment, to find the man's actually retraining himself from one industry into computer usages and computer understandings and techniques, trying to retrain himself into something in a program the leader of the National Party and the leader of the Liberal Party would abolish. I mean, the gall of you, the viciousness of you. And Mr Speaker, that is the issue here. Whether or not we would see under a Hewson government one of the most spiteful, vile governments in the Western world. That is one of the parties masquerading as a party within the democracies, but has such contempt for individuals, as he says, they will take their names. That is, the antagonists will get those. There's a list of those. Here it is. Hewson draws up a list of fight-backs, friends and foes.
Higgins.
Now, Mr Speaker, I've been in public life for 23 years, too long some say.
Order. The member for Bradfield.
But Bob Menzies would roll in his grave at this sort of stuff. Would roll in his grave at this sort of stuff. Would roll his at the viciousness, the callousness, the single-minded savagery of the responses to all these people. And the fact that they can't, and if we dare say, how dare you thug around a couple of Catholic priests in a Parliament House committee room by someone who's retiring from politics and know he doesn't have to run the gauntlet of public opinion again, the member for Pearce, for
Bradfield.
And we're saying, what a shocking thing to raise. I mean, we've got a right, says the Liberal Party, to knock around the Catholic Church, but not only knock them around, actually invoke an encyclical of their spiritual leader, the Pope, to attach to your lousy policies. I mean, how duplicitous, how brazen are you? I mean, I'll give you marks for being brazen. You actually flew into the Catholic Church while you've actually invoked the Pope as a source of the basic policy material of your party. I mean, how contemptible are you? How contemptible are you? And then we hear about the leader of the opposition talking about Lifeline. Lifeline. At the Wesley mission, it used to be there, sitting up in Castle Racetrip as he'd burn past in the boom time Ferrari. Talking about the Wesleyans. You're not content to tie the Wesleyans' shoelaces. Not to tie their shoelaces, much less mention their lifeline. And you omitted, of course, to tell us about the telephone calls for the Howard Hewson recession of 1982-3. You forgot to tell us about that, about the calls to Lifeline. When you all scurried off into the private sector to make your money, you forgot to tell us about the misery we were left with to try and pick it up through the 1980s. And you want me to say that having removed Australia from being basically a quarry, a mine and a farm without hope and without economic salvation, the one which is now engaged prosperously with the rest of the world, where our exports where we would otherwise seen our current account deficit double, how dare I say the government saved Australia's economic hide? How dare I say it? How dare I say it? Because it's absolutely true. Absolutely true. We've given Australia back its future. Back its future. As a trading country, it can lift its head up around the world. And what are we left with? The dullards of the opposition who didn't know what to do. I remember John Hewson here, I've said it before, in 1983. He was that glad the burden of responsibility had transferred to the other side of the House. Thank God he thought that someone knows what to do with the place, that someone has a policy to pull Australia out of the vacuous gloom it was in, slipping away as a primary producer without any hope of paying for its imports or maintaining a first world standard of living. How glad he was that I was sitting there till midnight and 1 in the morning working out a strategy in early 1983 with my colleagues. Or the Treasurer sitting in the ERC for 6 and 7 weeks on end trying to fathom a policy. He was so glad we were there to internationalise Australia and to see the great shift to exports and competitiveness and low inflation, as if you would ever have the wit to get the inflation rate to 1.5% when it was sitting at over 10 for a decade, sitting around 10% for a decade, and the so-called people of business managing the economy knew not what to do with it. You knew nothing what to do with it, changes to enterprise bargaining. All you want to do is change down to lower levels of remuneration, not change up to more innovation and flexibility. Just down, not up, as always. Because, as I said yesterday, the speech the member for Bennelong made could have been made in the Midlands of Britain in the late 19th century, because that's about all you're good for. That's about all you're good for. You don't understand. You don't understand people. And talking about the Leader of the Opposition, the brazen humbug, unemployed families, the very ones he tip off and send to the soup kitchens after 9 months. After 9 months, he dirted them, as the Treasurer said yesterday, all for jockeying over a position outside of the closed doors of Australia House in Britain to find some shelter for the night. That's what you would do, because you'd take the unemployment benefits off deserving people who through no fault of their own have been unemployed. And the unemployed, of course unemployment's too high and it's got to be got down, but why treat them so savagely as to knock them off unemployment benefits after 9 months? And then we heard the bleat about sole parent families. Well, the gall of you. The gall of you. The ones you will knock off benefit if they have children over 12. So if a woman is a sole parent or a man is a sole parent with a child over 12, they're tipped on unemployment benefit or off into the street. And yet you have the cynical gall to raise their fortunes here in this debate from the comfort station of your position in life. I mean, shame on you. Shame on you for doing for uttering such words. Shame on you. And then, Mr. Speaker, his diatribe about food. How he quotes my words about food. I made the words, but I also agreed, Mr. Speaker, in the last day of the tax summit deliberate to exempt food from the goods and services tax. To exempt food. But not only did the government not simply exempt food from the implication of a VAT or GST, we didn't impose one, because in the end we did listen. In the end we did listen. And when the Catholic Welfare Commission gave their views, and other interest groups gave their views about taxing food and the impact of GST, they were not savagely and brutally attacked. They were not put asunder under a torrent of political bile. They were treated with the respect that their position in society deserves, allows them to be treated. But this notion that you can go around attacking interest groups the way in which you have, and invoking me, here he is, go out and listen to people, like the 18-footers on Sydney Harbour last week, or up with the boys at Bathurst on the weekend with the $200,000 cars, playing with rich man's toys again. That's what he calls out, listening to the people, listening to all the grease monkeys changing the wheels on the Commodores and the Nissans. That's what he calls listening to people.
I warned them,
You're telling us about listening to people. Listening to people. You've never listened to anyone in your life you didn't think could advantage you. You've never listened to a soul in your life that you never thought could be of some advantage to you. Mr Speaker, I recommend the amendment to the House. It sums up this word, an explanation of his contempt and intimidation of the various groups in Australia who question and oppose his savage policies. Let this selfish man explain himself.